4. Hey, everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It's a joy to be with you today. You know, we're just coming out of March Madness, so I want to kind of break things up. We've been talking about the tariffs and wars and all of these things all over the place, and those things are very important. But guess what? Our college athletes, our high school athletes, they have a lot of importance. They generate a lot of money. College football, for example, generates about $4 billion a year. 1.3 billion of those dollars come from television rights. Basketball, more than $1 billion a year. And the fight has been, it's always been my opinion that these young people need to be paid. I remember when my brother used to have played football at UVA, which is a Division I school. It was very, very clear that he was being paid to play football. That was his job. It's a job, everybody. We've cloaked it as scholarships, but it's a job. That's probably why when LeBron James and Moses Malone and Kobe Bryant decide to go past basketball, college basketball, it throws everybody into disarray because guess what? They were going to generate a lot of money. Be very, very clear. It has nothing to do with all of their academic achievements and blah, blah, blah. They could make, no, this is a money-making proposition. And so let's talk about that because now we have gotten to a place where we have something called NIL, name, image, and likeness. The monies that these athletes have been generating for these programs, well, now they have an opportunity to make money off of these programs. And it is a really, really, really interesting situation that we find ourselves in because now some are going back and they're suing. Chris Jenkins, who made the winning shot, you remember, in the March Madness tournament of 2016. Well, he said, you know what? He's suing the NCAA and 6 conferences to recoup income he contends would have been earned if athletes at that time were not barred from making money from their names, images, and likenesses. Think about that. He's saying, wait a minute, you all have made money off of me. And I had a friend who had a neck injury in college football in a program that I will not name, but it's one of the biggest in the country. And fortunately, he had a father who was a man of a lot of education and some influence who said, no, you are not going to remove my son's scholarship. As a matter of fact, you are going to pay for him to get his PhD because he is facing paralysis. Thankfully, his neck injury healed, but he will always need some kind of medical care. He's got to watch out for that. So these are the things that you need to understand because these players are becoming better and better at younger and younger ages. And so C.K. Hoffler, attorney C.K. Hoffler, chair of the Rainbow Push Coalition. Of course, NIL is a new space that you and attorney Shannon Holmes are really carving out. And it's very important, I think, because we need to get these young people to get real representation that advantages them. Something you know that you work with Reverend Jesse Jackson very closely on helping these athletes to learn how to read their own contracts. Something that we learned from Bill Cosby was this. He said, number one, you read your own contract. You know the ins and outs of it. Don't give your money over to somebody else because you won't get it back. Think about that. That was something that Joe Jackson tried to impart to Michael Jackson and his brothers. That was something that Richard Williams imparted to Serena and Venus. That was something that Tiger Woods' father imparted to him. And those people who had parents like that, who were that involved, they did not die broke, or they were able to live out their lives in some comfort. But attorney C.K. Hoffler, you brought up an issue. First of all, welcome back to the show, but you all are family here, so I'm not welcoming friends. You're all a family. So here we go. So let's get to it. Because this is something that, as both of you have these really, really successful practices, but of course you have not one but 2 sons playing Division I college football in the United States. Very unusual position. And as you got in there, you said, wait a minute, My sons and all of these children need protection. And now we've got to put in young women, thankfully, because now college basketball is generating a lot of money on the women's side.
Mhm.
And it continues to move down to high school attorney homes. I mean, you're seeing a lot of money that these young kids are generating, and they're having to train early. Let's get real clear. I know I'm giving you all a whole lot because I want you to really understand what's going on here. The head of our Chicago Teachers Union uh, was assailed nationally for sending her son to a private school, a Catholic school here in Chicago. Well, I'm not in Chicago right now, but you get my point. And I said, wait a minute. Her son is a college prospect. So her son's high school is of tremendous consequence because the high schools can determine who's going to have eyeballs on you for your college, career. So it's not that simple anymore. If you have a child who's very, very talented as an athlete, even their high school now, that's a big decision you've got to make. And you've got agents swarming over these children. Okay, Attorney C.K. Hoffa, I mean, am I not right, you guys?
You are absolutely correct. And I have to really fully disclose. So I've been in this space with NIL, Shannon and I, from the beginning, because we formed a law group because we felt it was so critically important for these kids to have representation. My disclosure is I'm in it every day because of now my younger son. My older son is graduating he still got a couple of years left of eligibility. So I don't know if he's going to graduate completely out of football, but I think he is. He's thankfully graduating in a couple of weeks with a degree in economics from Georgia State.
Praise the Lord.
I'm still in prayer. You have to pray about these things until they walk across stage. But anyway, putting all of that aside, you hit it right on the nail, Santita. From Joe Jackson, but let me tell you who really deserves the credit. That's your dad, Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson Sr., because he negotiated the terms for the Harlem Globetrotters in the 60s, where they were doing all these acrobatic moves and jumping from one end of the court to the other, jumping up without health insurance. And imagine all the injuries that they were getting because they were really having to be superb basketball players and superb gymnasts.
Wait a minute. And let me say this. They were also working as men in their 40s and 50s and 60s because they had to. I mean, because I remember Curly Neal and Meadowlark Lemon because we used to go to all, I mean, and they had been Globetrotters for 20 and 30 years and 40 years, right?
With a cartoon. Let me tell you, and in the early 70s, I remember seeing them in Europe, in Switzerland. We were so excited when they would come. The Harlem Globetrotters, their impact was so dynamic. So that when we talk about negotiating, which is where we now find ourselves now with NIL, it started early with your dad. They just weren't calling it NIL, and of course, this was when they were professional athletes. So where are we today? It has reached just, I would say, crazy proportions. 2 years ago, in 2021, when we first started this, we first started seeing NIL on the scene, we called it the Wild Wild West. Now, when they had the congressional hearings a couple months ago, they called it the Wild West. It was the Wild Wild West because every state legislates its NIL. Then you have every school that has its own NIL policy. So what that means is, first of all, a lot of the people who are administrating in that space don't understand the rules of engagement. They don't understand, and I just know this based on negotiating with different schools. And then secondly, there's no continuity and consistency of how to approach NIL deals. So then what happens, like we have here, and I know I'm going to mispronounce his name, Nico Iam Mia Lieva.
Lieva, that's right.
Very good.
And we're just going to call him Nico.
Everybody's doing that.
My real name is Tricia, and people call me Drusilla. So I'm someone who, tries my best to get people's names correctly. But University of Tennessee quarterback, exceptionally talented athlete. Word has it, and the reason why I say word has it, because I haven't seen the contract. I haven't seen the terms.
Mhm.
And I can't believe what I read in the press about this because there are 20 different versions. But one thing that we know is that we know for a fact is word has it that he negotiated a contract valued at roughly $2.4 million
Per year.
per year. At
Okay.
some point, because these NIL contracts are usually year-long engagements.
Okay.
Okay, so at some there obviously are exceptions because they're contracts. So some people negotiate NIL deals for in 6-month increments. Some negotiate in 2 and 3 year and 4 year increments, but usually it's a year commitment. Why? Because of the transfer portal, because of what can happen and evolve in these sports where NIL is big, such as football and basketball and volleyball for girls. So I think what he negotiated a deal for, let's say 2.4 million, and then as a way of leverage, because someone of his incredible talent is being talked to, recruited all the time, whether those coaches are supposed to be talking to him or not. And so he understands his worth and tried to when I say he, probably his representatives
Mhm.
tried to renegotiate a deal for 4 million. Well, as a lawyer, and Shannon, we haven't talked about this in our group, but a deal is a deal is a deal.
Mhm.
If you have a contract for 2.4 million, that is your deal. You can always modify a contract if there is agreement by the parties. But if you go to University of Tennessee and say, hey, look, I know we negotiated 2.4, but I want it to be 4, and you have a contract for 2.4, guess what?
You
If the
play it out.
it's 2.4, and if you walk away from it, you could be in breach of contract unless there's something in the contract that allows you.
Well, hold on, slow down. What is the penalty if you walk away from it? Say if you decide to transfer schools.
Where every contract is
It's
different, and
different?
NIL is tricky. Suppose you get injured. Okay, let's just go right there.
Yeah.
So because it's not supposed to be a contract that's predicated on you making X number of touchdowns or whatever it is. It's not supposed to be that. But obviously, the NIL deals are pretty lucrative for some of the top players in the collegiate space. But if that athlete gets injured, which is at every practice, every single day, before a game, there is a possibility that that athlete is going to get injured. How do I know that? Because I live in that space. My son right now is injured. He has a hamstring injury from practice. Had nothing to do with playing in a game. They haven't even begun the season.
Yeah.
So this can happen. And that can take an athlete out, anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks to 6 to 8 months, depending upon if they have to have surgery or if it's just a rehab type of a situation.
Oh, wait a minute. Or it could end
Or it could end
a
right there.
career that could have gone to the professional space. And I'm interrupting because I think it's very important for us to understand the pressures, but I think also, and I'd like to offer this to you and to Attorney Holmes, but first to Attorney Hoffler. I think the athletes now are responding to generations of abuse. That's to
Absolutely.
say, when you see that these coaches oftentimes are the highest paid public servants in the state, in some instances, right?
Right.
Where they're making millions of dollars a year. I had no idea
Well,
that these big coaches were making that kind of money.
you're right. These are state schools. I'll give you an example. Clemson is a state school. People
Yeah.
think it's a private college. It's a state school, like University of South Carolina is a state school. I believe Dabo Sweeney's making $120 million. He has a $120 million contract.
And wait, and hold
He
on.
may deserve every penny of it. But let's just be clear.
Yeah.
Let's just be clear on the amount of money that these coaches are making. They may deserve it, but up until 2021, the players were making zero,
And that's
legitimately under the
and
table.
CK, that is the point. Because they're looking at, wait a minute, generations
Yeah.
of people. And then, wait a minute, if there's nothing sadder than going to a college football game with someone who did not, or a college basketball game with someone who did not make the pros,
Yeah.
and how the boosters who were all over them a year or two or so before barely speak to them.
Barely speak to them, and they can barely afford to do, because some of them may not have finished
Right.
their college education. But let me just quickly touch on what you said about Christian. There was a $2.8 billion suit that we look at all the time that is this is as a result of NIL, a series of a number of NIL litigations that took place over time, resulting in a $2.8 billion suit. They're working out the details of the distribution. But The bottom line is going back to 2016, anyone who was in a Power Five program playing these sports in Power Five program would be entitled to some form of compensation. And then there are grids that will determine how much. So when we talk about Chris Jenkins and his litigation and what he's contemplating, he theoretically could be covered under that. He may believe that he's not going to get enough money given what his contribution was. Because whenever you have a class, whenever you have that type of a class, a group, and 2.8 billion is a lot. But for those players in the past, we don't know what their distribution will be. Both of my sons are going to get paid under that agreement. The older one started in 2021. He was at K-State. That's a Power Five program. He's going to get paid. My younger son is now at Georgia Tech. He was at Clemson. He's going to get paid. Both of them, those are Power Five.
Yeah.
And they're in the conferences. So everyone's going to get paid. It's going to be a question of how much. And certainly Chris Jenkins has a great point. And that's why there's a lot of litigation that's emanating. But what this means from a real standpoint for those people, if you have any kids, any relatives who are athletically inclined at all in high school, these are the issues they're going to be confronting, because in states like Georgia and Florida, they can get paid NIL money. There are restrictions when they're in high school.
Well, and I can tell you, just going forward, fortunately, my brother Yusuf has done extremely well. But you talk about needing surgeries because of back injuries that you sustained in your college football career.
Absolutely.
He needs new knees, new hips. Wait a minute. This was at the end. This was at the end of the 80s.
My son had surgery in high school.
So I'm saying, you know, and also it's been professionalized, CK. So I mean, and I think we need to look at these folks, these athletes, and wait a minute, because Shannon wrote the book.
Let's talk about how he wrote the book. Let's talk about how Shannon Holmes, Holmes, attorney Shannon Holmes, wrote the book.
And I want you to go to Amazon and get it right now.
Absolutely.
It absolutely changes. Before you even get to the subtitle, Chief Executive Athlete. I mean, how do you handle yourself as a Fortune 500 corporation? Now, Michael Jackson had a board of directors, everybody, because he needed to figure out how to manage his money and make sound decisions. Because what he did as a child was sit up under his daddy, and he sat up under Berry Gordy. He got to know Reverend. He sat up under people who he felt really understood the ways of the world. He understood Al Bell. He understood Clarence Avant. He understood some of everybody. And that's just for example, right? But Chief Executive Athlete, hold on, because it's the way because I've read the book twice, because I had to figure it out, because I said, wait a minute, because my father and I used to go back and forth, CK, because he was a Big Ten athlete 60 years ago, right? And he ended up going to A&T. But he was like, no, he said, no, you're getting a scholarship. And this was 40 years ago. Now he's like, no, these kids need to be paid. I said, oh, yeah. Because we saw from my brother Yusuf's experience, and even my brothers who were at A&T, a black college, your job is to first play football. Your job is to first play basketball. If you don't produce,
you have 2 full-time jobs in college.
2 full-time. And guess what? If you don't produce on that court or on that field, your scholarship is in jeopardy.
Yeah.
Wait, Shannon Holmes, you got it. Chief Executive Athlete. First of all, what is the book about? Because it should be required reading, not just for people in high school, parents who have high school kids. When you see your child has some special talent, because I guess we have to go to gymnastics now and track and field. It's everywhere. You need to understand the monies they can make and how to manage it. But first, how to position themselves. So everyone follow me, Santita Jackson on Blue Sky at santitajackson.bsky.social. I'm on X at Santita J. I'm on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel and Santita Jackson and Friends on Facebook. Okay, Chief Executive Athlete, helping us to look at this in a whole different way. What is the book about? Why did you write it? Let me just start there, if you don't mind.
Hey, thanks, Santita, as always. I wrote the book really, it's been a culmination of years. I had the unique privilege of working for a sports agent while I was in college. And so obviously this is way before the NIL days. Someone asked me during that time in college, like, what did I want to do professionally? And I was like, well, I love sports and I love business and I love law. So, I figured out a way to position myself to work in each one of those spaces. But over those years, I've seen a lot, learned a lot. And I thought it was just important. Everyone talks about, and we've seen the ESPN specials that talk about the broke athlete. We've read the articles. We've seen the 30 for 30 documentaries. So I was like, instead of just talking about it, why don't we just, take some action and at least put it out in the universe? Hey, here's just a guide, right? So chief executive athlete, how to run your sports career like a Fortune 500 company. I just wanted to share with parents and with athletes, hey, you've got to look at yourself as a business. You're doing business with multi-billion dollar corporations, whether it's universities or the professional leagues. And so you have to understand your role in that. And how do you set yourself up like a company? What do these companies have? What do the pro teams have? They have a general counsel, they have an attorney, right? They have people handling their finances, they have someone handling their marketing, they have someone handling their taxes. So just in those few categories, if you're in this space as an athlete, high school, collegiate, professional, you have to have these things so that you can manage yourself as a business. And what are you providing? Right? I tell the athletes all the time, you're not just some guy running up and down the field of the court. You're actually providing your service. When you run up and down the field of the court, that's a service. If you play defensive back in football, your job is to defend a receiver that's trying to catch the ball from the quarterback. You're providing a service. Your company, you provide a service. That's your first product under a service. And then from there, what else can your company produce? Right. So then you look at endorsement opportunities. So you look at investment opportunities. Do you want to own real estate? Do you want to just be a silent guy? Do you just want to endorse products? Do you not want to have your face out in the public? Do you want to do deals behind the scenes? There are all these various situations that you can produce within your company, but you first have to have the mindset that you're not just some athlete running up and down the field of the court, but you're actually a business providing a product and or service.
Well, hold on. That brings me to this question for you, Attorney Holmes. Number one, do they get it? Do their guardians, their parents, do people get it when you first tell them that?
It's a great question, Cynthia. Initially, no, right? There's this look of days like, what do you mean? Like, because the norm historically has been, look, I just go play. Their parent, their dad, or their mom just played, right? And so they don't think of it because they've not been immersed in this economic system of sports,
But
right?
wait a minute,
But
but also the culture. When you got the corporate
yes,
media who don't
yes.
allow they praise the coaches. The assistant coaches can make near $1 million a year and
Hmm.
more, right?
Hmm.
They praise, they look at the schools because I mean, come on, let's look at these at the television shows, the optics of this thing. You go on the campuses, and I mean, look, I am a fan. Look, I love Harlequin romances and 50s and 60s movies about like college life. Yes, I am a sap. I get it. Trust me, my parents would look at me like I was nuts because they look, Tammy and Sandra D and oh my God, and what is it, Moondoggie and all. I loved all of that, and I loved watching them on the campuses. And that was not quite true. This
Hmm.
this is big money, big business, and so what I appreciate about your book, and I had to read it again because I said, wait a minute, I'm not asking the right questions on the front side, CK, because you brought Shannon to me, and you said, no, girl, you got to read the book that he has because it shifted my paradigm because I'd already felt that they needed to get paid. And
Hmm.
not just those in the, because now more and more of these sports generate income, right? But I said, wait a minute, but you have to see yourself very differently
Right.
because you have to look at the school, you have to look at this as a business.
You do.
And they don't approach you that way. I mean, because many of
No.
these kids are poor. They're the first generation to go to college. Now with CK's kids, it was a whole, and with my brother, quite frankly, it was a whole different kettle of fish. They never saw her coming. So I remember hearing her experiences. They looked at her like, "Who number one? Who are you?
Well,
What kind
Santita,
of
that it's interesting. It's interesting you say that because you're right. And sadly, we have two different parents, right? And CK and I talk about this all the time. We have CK and her family, and CK being as sharp and as educated as she is, and so involved in understanding how to, at least even before she was immersed in the sports side, she took the time to learn about it and had the ability to do so. But so many other parents don't, right? And we see that when you talk about asking me the question, what do they get it? Typically, the parents who are like us get it, but those who come from the lower economics parts of our economy and of our culture, they don't, right? And so
Well, they're
it is
also being told not to
Right.
listen to
But
you,
they make up
right?
correct,
98% of the players. So let's
correct.
Yeah.
That's
the
right,
the more informed, engaged, we're like a half a percent.
correct,
Yeah, but they're telling they're telling people don't listen to Shannon. This guy
correct.
doesn't listen.
Absolutely.
And
Let me
yet
tell
there's
you
some
about
kid
that.
who's not a lawyer, and they put him on as the agent. I'm
That's
like,
right.
oh, I've seen
I,
I've seen the get Shannon go on because I've
Oh,
seen
I can
the game
tell
go on.
you, and CK can tell you about the calls we've had, and people will enlist our services. But once we say, "Hey, stop, pump your brakes, let us get our hands wrapped around this," they don't call us back anymore because they feel like we're going to impact their ability to get that 250,000 on Friday or that $500,000 on next Thursday, right? And so that's exactly what happens. And they are willing to have someone else say, no, don't worry about those lawyers, but don't mess up this deal type thing because again, this is the biggest and the most amount of money they've ever seen, and they're afraid of losing it. So that's a really real thing that happens every day. But I want to touch on three things really quickly, if I can. There are three things happening here. Obviously, NIL, which we've talked about, which was supposed to be about the athletes being compensated for their name, their image, and their likeness that's used by the universities, by the NCAA, by the networks to promote these sports. And that quickly shifted, right? What I mean by that is very few players are being compensated directly for their name, image, and likeness. How they're actually being compensated is there are these things called collectives, which are third party associations that are, if you will, support groups of the universities that have raised monies to offer athletes to attend that school. And so it's not what they thought. Initially, what they thought was, or what they described was, hey, you have Yusuf Jackson. He's a great ball player at the University of Virginia, and the local car dealership would have Yusuf come out and do sign some autographs and have his name on billboards. Say, hey, I shop for my cars here, and get compensated that way, right? Because now he's using his name, his image, his likeness to be compensated, right? But very few athletes are getting those opportunities. I mean, like less than 2%. If I when's the last time I looked at the numbers?
Well, I
For
mean,
the
but what
most
happened with Reggie Bush? I mean, I'm sorry, just the
great
Heisman.
question. So Reggie Bush situation was just pre NIL. Basically, it was pre NIL where those around the university allegedly were helping, and the facts of the story. CK and I always say we weren't there, so we don't know what actually happened. But what I will say, allegedly, there was some potential assistance with helping his family secure housing in the California area, and some other things that made some benefits he may have received. And to fast forward, and so then he was all of his awards were stripped away from him. All of his records at USC were stripped down and
His
taken away.
Heisman.
His Heisman was taken away. And fast forward now to post NIL, with the help of attorney Benjamin Crump and some other lawyers, they were able to revisit this with the Heisman Trust, and they were able to get his Heisman reinstated by saying, "Hey, look at where we are now with the NIL." And Reggie was no different than what's happening now. And so his records were restored, his relationship with USC was restored, and most importantly, he was able to receive his Heisman trophy back.
But you
So
know what's
that's kind of,
awful? But Shannon, let me say this, and I want you to continue, please, because I'm interrupting you. But you all, the whole system to me is still so unfair. What has not been restored fully has been his reputation.
oh, of course, that,
I mean, but
well, yeah,
it's like this is one of the greatest college football players to have ever played the game. certainly in his era.
Right.
And he was savaged by corporate media. Attorney Holmes, Attorney Oswald,
Yes.
he was savaged. And these
Yes.
kids get savaged for looking out for themselves, but also they get savaged for having people like you and CK represent them. Because on the other side, you're negotiating with this big corporation called the university or whomever, and they will pull these athletes back, pull them back and say, now, we'll give you the money, but you can't deal with them.
Right.
They're too much.
No,
CK's too much because CK, I already know. She's my lawyer to fully disclose. She's my lawyer, everybody. She's my lawyer.
that's right.
And everybody in my family, she's everybody's lawyer. And she is a lot of trouble. And so are you, Attorney Holmes. You're a lot of trouble. So I mean, please continue on, but also it's about finding the right person who's going to stand with you, even when the powers that be tell you or tell the athlete, tell the person who's at the center, don't fool with Shannon Holmes. He's no, and
Well,
no.
that's right. So I was going to say the second point is that the reason we're talking about the Nico situation, the reason we're even really dealing with the Nico situation is part of it's NIL, but the other part's related to what you ladies both mentioned before is with the coaches, right? We realized that the coaches were moving freely. The coaches were signing deals and able to leave and go from one school to the other at their own option, right? And finally, someone got to the NCAA and said that's just not fair, right? We're holding these athletes to their commitments at the respective schools, but the coaches can leave whenever the coach recruits this kid, but the coach can then leave, but the kid can't, right? So that's really what we have now. Now we have pretty much a free and open system where the kids, can leave and go wherever they please. And some kids will play in a Power Five conference. Some kids could play in all Power Five conferences if they manage it properly. They could play in each one of the conferences, one conference per year for 5 years, if they so choose.
Theoretically, hypothetically, theoretically, I mean, I've done the transfer portal twice with my kids. And
Mm-hmm.
let me tell you, that transfer portal is no joke. There are a lot of kids that go into the transfer portal and never come out.
That's right.
Conceptually, what that means. You go into the transfer portal, you tell the school you're at, because you've got to get the school to sign off on it. There's a process that involves your school. So they know you're in the transfer portal. Now they're looking to replace you. And in many instances, you're done with that school, whether you get placed in another school or not. So a lot of kids do not get out of the transfer portal, and they may not have the ability to finish their college education because they don't get picked up by another school. I mean, this is real. And so I know hypothetically, intellectually, before hypothetically, one of my sons entered the transfer portal, I had probably already negotiated hypothetically the terms of his transfer if he were going to go to a certain school. But it wasn't until he entered the transfer portal till officially we could engage. But the terms are already done because I was not, for my clients, I'm not willing to wait and see what they're for. So if you're going to enter the transfer portal, if you're a student, you better know, you usually have some idea of who's going to pick you up. And then you can say, well, how would you know that? Because the NCAA says the coaches can't talk to. Well, your high school coach can. So Santita, you said something early about how the coaches, high school recruiting coaches at schools, particularly well-funded schools, high schools that produce a lot of really strong athletes. And you see this in places like Georgia, Florida, probably Texas, and Alabama. They are always in touch with all of these Power Five programs in these schools. I know for a fact that if you at any point you have an athlete who's not satisfied, is thinking for one reason or changing, and they can't talk to the coaches, their high school coaches can talk to them.
Are they being paid too?
About new talent. Well, so this is a question. High school coaches are there to, if they're recruiting, and again, these are usually well-funded and sophisticated high school programs, they're being paid by the high schools to place their students. But when you graduate from that school, so let's say hypothetically, when my younger son was being heavily recruited, and he ended up with 54 offers. So when Georgia, University of Georgia's head coach flew to Woodward Academy where my son was and landed on the football field in his private helicopter. He was looking and trying to recruit my son, but in the process, because how do they recruit? They go to practice. They look at them in practice. He's also looking at other students, and he's done this year after year after year after year after year, right? Kirby Smart. So when that happens, he's looking at, and so the coaches develop relationships with all of these places at school. So that coach in high school could say, hey, I got somebody you got to look at. So, I mean, all of these are all built on relationships, Santita. And I know for a fact the relationships continue. So let's say, hypothetically, you're somebody that you help place 1 year at some place. He's not getting the playing time. He's not happy. First person he's going to call is his high school coach. Why? Because the people that recruited him in high school, many of them follow him. And while he can't, this is someone, if they don't have relationships with or lawyers or something, but they're going to call the high school coach because the high school coach is still talking to those coaches about new students and might say, hey, I know y'all were heavily recruiting, John Doe. Are y'all still interested? Have you seen what John Doe's done? He's now at this school. Any interest? So it's really, so the high school coaches can play and there's nothing that is impermissible about that level of contact. Now, getting paid, I think that is impermissible. I think it could be a conflict for the high school coaches, but I think a lot of the high school coaches, they preserve the relationships because it's bragging. They're bragging rights. They have bragging rights. Hey, so-and-so graduate from here, because it's how they attract other players about their program. We have a Robros program. All of these great college and now NFL people or people who are the NBA, they started right here.
But hold on. But that's why, and I can't thank you enough, CK, for bringing Shannon's book to my attention. Chief Executive Athlete, How to Run Your Sports Career Like a Fortune 500 Company. Because you have to get these kids and their parents early, CK. But CK is, well, first of all, I'm not going to even say it's unfair. The fact is, you are a world-renowned lawyer. And so you have a whole different view. You understand, Shannon, a lot of these parents don't understand. They don't. Now, hold on, because Richard Williams came out of segregation and sharecropping and all of that. He understood it, and he was not playing. But even his kids were onboarded into professional sports. And you see the heat that he took because he understood business. He really did. So, I mean, when we're looking at this young man, Nico, who is saying, wait a minute, I'm not, I know so-and-so's getting paid this. I know what I'm bringing to the marketplace. I was lowballed, I believe. And this is what happens all the time. Now, I'm understanding and appreciate and respect that, you signed a deal and you live with it. But I also understand this is the marketplace too. I mean, it's just,
Santita, I just have to, as a lawyer, there are many times, a deal is a deal is a deal.
That's true.
And for my clients, I don't want to open my clients up to litigation. Because guess what's happening with Nico right now? Other coaches voluntarily are saying, well, let me tell you, at this school, we wouldn't renegotiate with him.
Mm-hmm.
So now other coaches are publicly taking a position at their schools on how they would handle the Nico situation. So two things. What's that doing for Nico? That's not really helping Nico.
No, it's not.
My impression. That's not helping Nico because now suppose those schools were schools he was interested in going to, those coaches feel some kind of way. They don't want to open up the floodgates because why every single athlete will want to renegotiate their contract.
But it's also what's happening. The system is getting exposed for the business that it is, which is why you need to come in as a chief executive athlete. You need
have your legal team on that front. A lot of times non-lawyers, and I'm not doing this to pump lawyers, I'm just doing it to say when the stuff is hitting the fan like with Nico, we're probably going to end up as litigation. Okay, so when you have non-lawyers who might be great at negotiating deals with this and that, but not the fine details of contracts and what happens, what if. It's not just about the money. Then where is the athletes need to be protected? I'm
Mhm.
not certain. I'm not there. I haven't seen the contract. I don't know. And maybe he does have lawyers representing him. But if he doesn't, he needs to get lawyers because there's going to be litigation resulting. I'm more concerned about Nico in the process
Yeah.
because now some schools are taking positions about him. Remember what happened to Colin
Kaepernick. Yeah.
Kaepernick? I mean, he was just taking the knee. We don't need to,
Oh
get
no,
real
look,
high tech with that.
Mark Jackson got blacklisted in the Indiana.
Blacklisted, blackball could not, and that now
Absolutely.
maybe they can get back and this and that, but there are things that can happen with NIL because of the billions of dollars. And trust me, a lot of coaches, Nick Saban quit. He said he didn't want to have to deal with, right, Shannon? He didn't want to have to deal with NIL and all that. He's the
That's
first
right.
up there now taking a position on what's happening with Nico.
Wait a minute. After he's made all the money in the world, I'm not not mad at
I'm
you.
not mad at him
I'm
either,
I'm
but
just
I'm not,
saying.
but I'm not saying he did this, but back in his day, the coaches, the coaches from Alabama, the coaches from Ohio, not mad at them. Ohio State, maybe the coaches from Michigan, a couple other schools, they dominated the talent.
And wait a minute.
They were the
And
NFL.
they and CK and Shannon, they cleaned up. I am not mad because what we have not known is how much money these sports, these income generating sports have been generating for the schools. Wait a minute, and their communities. Wait a minute, and their states. Wait a minute, and the regions. Because you got little businesses around the school
Oh, tons of
Mhm.
little
who
businesses.
make a lot of money when okay, the basketball season has started, college football season has started. Wait a minute, hey, it's even going back to high school now.
Yep.
Because particularly when you go in these, not just the South, but in smaller communities,
Yep.
high school, and college sports are everything.
The vendors.
You have to hope, but let me bring in Shannon. We're gonna box him out. We're almost like
And he's
like
the one who has the real talent and skill. But go ahead.
no, we know both of y'all have it, but we got the one guy here he's sitting here, but he's well trained. He's got a beautiful wife, and he knows when to hush. But I'm not mad. But come on, but Shannon, I mean, help us to understand. Just where do we go? Because we're looking at. I mean, because CK made the point, and you've made the point that wait a minute. Now, not only are Nico's college relationships compromised on at that level.
hmm
Now the NFL is looking at him some kind of way because they're all connected.
Yeah, Nico will be fine. I mean, he'll land. But what most important, as we all know, is about performance, right? Wherever he lands, he needs to perform. Because when it comes to the NFL, it's a whole nother giant of a conversation, right? Respect to, hey, it's a real about profits and business and product. And so if he can perform and if he's performing at a high level, there's going to be a team that wants to make sure he's in their locker room. But I hope that, again, not knowing all that took place down there, I hope that wherever he lands at a good place. He lands at a place that welcomes him with open arms, and then he performs well. Because that's what it boils down to. Again, even in my book, Santita, that you were talking about, I mentioned all this building your brand, running yourself as a business. The first thing is performance. When you look at LeBron James's career, whatever you may think about him, he has performed and performed for a very long time. And secondly, one thing that LeBron did well, he controlled the narrative about him. His team made sure that the messaging that went out about him was what he wanted to go out. And they've done an outstanding job of that with his on the court and off the court messaging and branding. But none of that would be possible, and none of us would even be paying attention if he wasn't performing well. And so even when we talk about the high school kids, the college kids, and the professionals, it's all starts with you performing. And again, the performing goes back to just being a business. Amazon, when we click the button, we want Amazon to grab the product and deliver it to our door, right? When we call FedEx, we want them to pick up a package and get it to the destination as we've asked. When we go to our favorite restaurant. We want them to prepare our meal just like they prepared it last time. That's why we're back, because we like it, right? So the same thing with these athletes. You have to perform and produce, and continue to produce to stay on top and to stay relevant and to make sure that you're treated properly and compensated fairly.
But I mean, but how do this is just it is a whole lot. Because while you've got to perform, you're saying at the same time, what do they say? Business is twice as big as show, right? You really need to understand the business. You know, Roberta
Yes,
Flack, who just made her transition, she was a pop star. She was not nominated. She got some R&B nominations to be sure, but unlike, say, even Aretha Franklin and Gladys Knight, I mean, these are like the titans of Black women in music. She was nominated and won in the pop category against Barbara Streisand and people like that. So her money corresponded to that, because
right,
that was one of Luther Vandross's struggles. He was trying to break into the pop space because that's the money is unreal over there.
right.
He always said to me, "Remember, your father told me you could never be too busy to take care of your busyness."
That's right.
And that was one of my takeaways from your book. And she liked the title very much, by the way. I just want you to know that, because I remember sharing that with her, because I remember her saying that to me, because when I worked for her, I also worked in her office, because
Mm,
she wanted me to, she said, "I want you to, and you're sharp enough to understand this business. I don't want you to get in here and not know how this works, booking, and why you keep your crew small, because you're paying for everybody.
that's right.
You know, I'm paying, when I've got to, when I have a shoot, I'm paying for the food. Now I don't need 50 people working for me when I can have five.
Mhm.
And if I can cut it down to two, that's great. But I know I need them to help take a lot of this lift off me so that I can perform.
Right.
So what my question for you is, because I only have like 7 or 8 minutes left for you and CK, and I want you all to come back and talk about this, because to me this has implications in sports, but in entertainment, because sports is part of entertainment now,
Mhm.
right?
Oh, absolutely.
So help me to understand, if you saw, I mean, and we're seeing these athletes who are becoming, I mean, they're phenomenal athletes in high school. We had a high school kid who won a gold medal in the last Olympics in track and field.
That's right.
What do you say to these parents? I mean, what advice would you give them?
Well, the first thing is just, obviously engross yourself in learning about the industry, number one. But number two, surround yourself, as you just said, Santita, surround yourself with professional people that can help counsel and advise you. That's critical, right? There's no way to exist in this space now without proper guidance counsel, particularly legal counsel, financial representation, in this space. You're going to need it, because as you grow, there are more people pulling at you. And you made an interesting comment. You can't be too busy to take care of your busyness is a great summation. You've got to stop and take care of the business, of what you're doing, and what you're doing. And then when you're performing, again, you got to continue to perform at a high level. But I think everyone has to stop, take a breath, and make sure you have people around that you can support you in this space. I think that's super critical.
Well, a chief executive athlete, that is something, that's a whole paradigm shift in your thinking. Um, because, I think thankfully we are past the athlete who is not smart. You got to learn.
Right.
I mean, everything you've learned, you got to apply. That's a very hard thing to do. And then you have to be creative with
Right.
it. These people, they're extremely sharp, and sometimes they're intentionally kept away from education and information, because the more you know, the more protective you are. I mean, there are a lot of things. And so, CK, just moving forward, where do you want these people to go? Because now you have you have young boys, you also have young girls now.
Mhm.
Because I mean, thankfully, Dawn Staley and these other coaches. I mean, Dawn Staley is a goat. So yeah, she should be making millions of dollars a year because she's
Right.
translated her greatness from high school to college to the professional as an athlete to being one of the greatest coaches we've ever seen. So
And
I'm
before CK responds, I just want to throw this out at you, ladies. So I read a conservative article last week that talked about the fact that she was making, I don't know, what, 3 or 4 million a year, but the program is still losing money. And so they questioned, should she be making her salary? I mean, here we go again. So I just wanted to throw that out, CK,
no,
before
no,
you close this out.
you can't just throw that out. I
That's
mean,
a big.
why are they questioning her money, Shannon?
Oh,
What?
again, they're questioning her money in their view, and again, from the author's perspective, is because the program is losing money. It's a state school, and why should they be paying her so much money? That was the narrative of their article.
Well,
I think it's a couple things, right? I think
uh,
it's sexist. I think it's sexist to begin with, number one. And in part, I think it's also racist,
mhm.
right? Because of who she is. And I think it's, I'm gonna use a word, I think it's culturalist, right? Because she's, African American female coach. She dresses a certain way. She has a certain relationship with her players. And I think they were basically taking an attack on her, which I think is completely unfair.
It's unfair. And you know what? Women's basketball is beginning to catch up to men's basketball.
It's slowly getting there.
It's
Yes.
and it is going to get there
Right.
because when you have someone who is as exciting, particularly these women coaches, black and white, they're very exciting. They're very extremely colorful, and now we're paying attention to them.
Yes.
And I'm saying, and good on that because I love it.
Right.
I love it. Love
Right.
it. Attorney C.K. Hoffler, what do you want? I guess speaking as a parent, as first as a parent, because I mean, because that to me is part of the appeal that you would have to say, wait a minute, you guys, pump the brakes. I know you have been in the room with parents who really had no idea. They just thought they were sending their kids got a great scholarship to a great school, and that was it. And you're like, no, you and Shannon Holmes, chief executive athlete, how to run your sports career like a Fortune 500 company. Everybody get the book and pass it along to everybody you know. You need to stand out of high school and just pass out the book.
Well, that's what I want. I want for people to take Shannon's advice. On Sunday, or about a month ago, I spoke to one of the bar associations here on NIL. They asked me to come speak at NIL. And in the audience, there was a very senior, I don't want to give too many details, there was a senior, say, prosecutor, whatever, and her son was there, and her son looked very much like AJ, my younger son. So I looked at, and I had to do a double take. This young boy was going in ninth grade. He was 6'2" and 250,
Oh my gosh.
and brilliant intellectually, academically, and at one of these schools here. And when he found out, I mean, I think he was there with a lot of lawyers and all these kinds of. When he found out that I mean, I think he was listening when I said, but that I was AJ's mom. Then I became a superstar. I was just whatever, really like whatever. But when he found out I was AJ's mom, and so what I did is I orchestrated AJ and him talking, like the families got together. Just as you said, Santita, there are bigger, there are stronger, there are more dynamic, smart players every single year that are graduating. And I know with my sons, they got a microphone every time they did something in high school. Good, the press was there, and they put a microphone in there, and they had to talk and speak. So these kids are poised for greatness, but they're also poised for terrible failure if they don't have the proper representation in the way that Shannon is saying it. And I can tell you, there's so many people who I've talked to so many parents. Shannon, I know you've talked to so many parents. We all collectively have. Then in the beginning, they said, okay, and they got our information, they got our advice, and then we didn't hear back from them. Now we're calling back and saying, yeah, we had a little problem with the NIL contract situation. my son didn't get paid, something happened, this and that happened, the school reneged on this. And they may not have listened because they didn't think they had to. They listened, they said that's good, but they didn't want to jeopardize that deal. And now there are issues and there are problems because there's a sea change. So, two things that I'd like to say. One, I'm glad that the women are in the game. What we're seeing now is college athletes extending their athletic career in college because they're getting NIL money. The women's basketball players are coming out and getting paid less than they were getting paid in college when they're in national leagues. So it makes more sense for them to stay in college to make more money to be able to leverage. But when they go into the pros for the women, they're not going to get paid. We know the history of Brittany Griner and all of the women in the WNBA. So that's something to think about. By the way, 90% of those athletes getting NIL money will not make it to the pros, men and women.
That's right.
It's important for them to capitalize on this moment. And then the last thing, I'm just going to drop it out there. Have you noticed that the only place where there's no discussion of DEI, getting rid of DE to the I, the dad, the black people too much, and all that, is when it comes to college athletics.
Women and the military.
Well, the military has been impacted.
Yeah. No, I'm saying those are carve-outs.
Right. But what I'm saying is there's not even been a discussion or the daring of a discussion. Why? Because we have a business person in the White House. And that business person in the White House and his business person who is working with him, they understand that when it comes to that, if you start looking at DEI when it comes to college athletics, there will be no issues. None.
It'll be over.
None of them will win. It will be over. Game finished, done. So what I want to leave for us to ponder is what if our college athletes understood their power as they are understanding the power that they have now with NIL? If they understood their power collectively more, like some are encouraging them to do, and said, I don't want to go to these schools in Florida. Because as a college student, it's important for me to have DEI, to have African American professionals that are there, to have a Black student union, to have all these organizations that support Black students like me when I'm on campus, and you all don't have them. They are now legally not allowed in this state, and I feel comfortable playing football and running up and down the field and doing that and putting my life and my body at stake in this state. Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Texas. I'm just not feeling Mississippi. I'm not feeling comfortable. By the way, that's why the Mississippi flag, Confederate flag, came down. It wasn't because of decades of litigation. It was because the athletes said, I don't know if I want to go to Ole Miss. I'm not feeling so good, when I'm playing and I'm looking at this Confederate flag. So I just pose that for our consideration. What if? You know how there's this movie, What If?
Yes.
What if our college athletes, 98% of them understood and exercised their power to influence what is happening when their support mechanisms on campus? Because it's more than just about their support mechanisms in a football program, in a basketball program, in a volleyball program, in a lacrosse program. It's about when you come home, when you leave the field, what support do you have? Because it's making you feel some kind of way. I will leave it. I'm not going to name the school, but when the school was recruiting my son, one of the reasons why he was not interested in going to this real top school, whatever, and shut down discussions was because he talked to some football players who transferred to another school, and they talked about how when they were on the field playing, they were heroes. As soon as the game was over, they were treated like third-class citizens, not just by the administration on campus, but by other students. And they felt that was a hostile environment for them, and they didn't want to be in that environment, and they didn't like it. So they transferred because they were elite
That's
players.
right. And that is the point.
That discussion.
Well, all of that, because when affirmative action was ended, guess what? The carve out was on the military because they needed Black and brown bodies. DEI, the carve out is on athletics because they need Black and brown bodies.
Because there would be no
understand your power. NBA, they were going to strike when, in the middle of the playoff season, when George Floyd was killed. But LeBron James and President Obama talked them over the ledge. But guess what? No NBA players, no playoffs, no championships. Know your power, everybody. Chief Executive Athlete. Get the book by Shannon Holmes. And check out
Thank you.
Koffler on Court TV and on our own radio show on what is it?
AOK today at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time.
Every Tuesday?
Every Tuesday. And I'll tell you the topic today, something else to just say it. I'll say it really quickly, is about the Fulton County Jail that where the Justice Department in November 2024 issued a scathing report that it's one of the most horrific jails in terms of the conditions and everything. I have a wrongful death case against them because it's virtually a death sentence if you are arrested in Fulton County and if you're a man and you go to that jail.
Because wasn't someone eaten to death by the bed?
Eaten to death by the but my client was stabbed over 20 times. He was there for a minor allegation of a property crime and was stabbed by someone who had been there for 4 years. Jail was a holding cell for 4 years.
Well, you know what?
I
want you to come back on this show and talk about it because there's more than one of those jails across the country, everybody. It's not a prison, that's a jail. So these people can't bail out. Think about that. AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota, sending you all much love. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show.